JSON parse or network error, expecting value line 369 column, 1 char 2024. You remember that feeling, don't you, when you meet someone, and it just clicks? It's like finding the other half of your brain. That's how it was with Alex. We weren't just partners. We were a unit. I trusted him implicitly. I'd have bet my life on his integrity. We built the company from a sketch on a napkin into something real, something with weight. And through all of it, he was my brother. We celebrated every win together, weathered every setback. I never once questioned his motives. That was my first. Required effective immediately that my login credentials had been revoked for security reasons. It wasn't a victory cheer kind of moment. It was a quiet, profound, and devastating release, a finality. The tie was severed legally, financially. The business was mine completely. But it was also the moment our friendship was officially legally dead. The paper was its death certificate. The disentanglement after that was a grim mechanical process, closing joint accounts, dividing what few personal assets were left. It was like a divorce settlement. Because that's exactly what it was. The emotional disentanglement is the harder part, learning to not see your face. When I think of the good times, learning to trust my own judgment again, I'm moving on. The business is thriving now under my sole direction. But I run it differently. The boundaries are clear, the contracts are thorough. I am learning to trust people again, but it's a wiser trust, a trust with safeguards, because I learned the hardest lesson there is you should never mix love and business, and you should always get it in writing. Let's talk about the day I thought I lost everything, my life's work, the company I built from an idea scribbled on a napkin, and let's talk about the man I almost lost it to, my best friend, my partner. This isn't just a story, it's a cautionary tale, and I am telling it to you because I see that same bright-eyed trust in you that I once had. I want you to learn from my mistakes, not live through them yourself. The big mistake, trusting a handshake. Our beginning was pure optimism. We met in a parking space, two people with a shared passion, and a big idea. The energy was magnetic. We'd stay up all night, fueled by bad coffee and big dreams, mapping out our future on whiteboards. We were a team. He handled the sales, the big vision, the charisma. I handled the operations, the logistics, the details. It was a perfect match. And because we were friends first, because we finished each other's sentences, we thought that was enough. The foundation of our multi-million-dollar company was a handshake over a beer. We said the words 50-50 partners all the way. And we believed that was a contract. We believed our friendship was the strongest legal document in the world. That was the big mistake, the romantic fatal flaw. We never defined what 50-50 actually meant. Did it mean equal share of the profits? Sure. But what about the losses? What about the decision-making power? What happens if one of us wants to leave? What happens if we disagree on a fundamental direction? For the company, we had no answers. Our shared vision was a beautiful, fragile bubble, and we refused to see that the real world has sharp edges. A handshake is a gesture of goodwill. It's a symbol. It is not a shield against greed, against changing circumstances, against the slow erosion of a relationship under pressure. A partnership is a business first, and a friendship second. When you mix the two, you must protect both. We failed to protect either. I finally got him on the phone. His voice was different, cold, flat. He said it's nothing personal. The business needed a new direction, a single vision. I was sputtering. I said our business. And he said the words that felt like a physical blow. He said it was never our business. You were a valued employee. But the company was always mine. You must have misunderstood our arrangement. The warning signs I ignored. The change wasn't sudden. It was a slow creeping frost, a series of small things I explained away, because the alternative, a confrontation, was too uncomfortable. The first sign was the financial secrecy. Early on we shared everything, but after our first big round of funding, he started being elusive. I'd ask for a detailed report on a major client payment, and he'd wave me off. Don't worry about it. It's handled. Focus on the product launch. And I told myself, he's just stressed from the investor meetings. I don't want to nag. I need to trust him. Then came the unilateral decisions. He hired a new marketing director without consulting me. I found out when I got a welcome email from HR when I brought it up. He was dismissive. It was a time-sensitive opportunity. You would have agreed anyway. I felt a knot in my stomach, a clear signal that something was wrong. But I untied it with excuses. He's the big-picture guy. This is how he operates. I don't want to seem controlling. The most glaring red flag was his sudden aversion to paperwork. We needed to sign a standard amendment to our operating agreement to reflect the new funding. Just a formality, he dodged it for weeks. It's just bureaucracy. Our handshake is what matters. I felt a chill when he said that. My gut screamed that this was wrong. But the cost of avoiding that difficult conversation felt higher than the cost of letting it slide, so I slid again. Each compromise, each time I chose peace over principle, I was building my own prison. I was handing him the keys, one polite silence at a time. The lesson is brutal, but simple. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong in a partnership, it is wrong. The desire to avoid being seen as distrustful is exactly what allows betrayal to grow in the shadows. Politeness is a terrible business strategy. The one thing that saved me: meticulous documentation. The storm hit on a Tuesday. He called me into his office. He started calling it that. His tone was cold, completely foreign. He told me the business was struggling, that my operational style was holding us back. He said the investors agreed. He said with a pitying look that it was best if I resigned. He offered me a small, insulting severance for my contributions. He said our handshake deal was a relic of a naive past. He was moving the company forward without me. The world tilted. The friend Id built this with was gone, replaced by a cold strategist. I felt a nauseating wave of panic. I had nothing but our vague promises. But then I remembered the one thing I had insisted on against his joking complaints about my obsession with paperwork years earlier. When we formalized the company for the investors, we had to create a proper operating agreement. It was a dense, dry document. He wanted to just sign the standard template our lawyer provided, but Id spent a weekend going through it line by line. The ground fell out from under me. I questioned everything: my memory, my contributions. Had I just been an employee? Did I imagine the partnership, the shares, the late nights, building something that was supposedly never mine? He gaslit me so completely that I started to believe his version of events. Maybe I had been confused. Maybe Id built it up in my head. That's the true horror of psychological warfare. It makes you an accomplice in your own destruction. There was a clause about ownership transfer in the event of a voluntary departure. The template was vague. I insisted we amend it. I drafted a clearer, more specific clause. It stated that if either partner voluntarily resigned or was removed for any reason other than gross misconduct, their shares would be offered to the remaining partner at a fair market value to be determined by an independent auditor. It was a single page, an amendment. He signed it with a laugh, calling me paranoid. I had kept that document. I had scanned it. I had a copy in a safe deposit box my lawyer held. That single piece of paper, created out of my innate need for order, was my lifeline. While he had been avoiding paperwork, I had been diligently keeping records. Every major decision we had ever made, even the ones we agreed on verbally, I had followed up with an email per our conversation. We agreed to X. I had boxes of meeting notes, all signed at the bottom by both of us. I had a trail of evidence of my involvement, my ownership, my authority. The mantra that saved me is this: if it's not written down, it didn't happen. Your memory is fallible. Your friendship is emotional. A signed document is a fact. Your business partnership survival guide. So if you're going into business with someone you love, whether it's a friend or a family member, you need to do the unromantic work. You need to build the fences, not because you expect a fight, but because strong fences make good neighbors. They define the boundaries and protect the relationship. First, the partnership agreement. This is non-negotiable. It cannot be a standard template you download from the internet. It must be custom-built for your venture. Essential clauses include a buy-sell clause. What happens if one of you wants out? How is the value of the business determined? Is it a right of first refusal? A shotgun clause. Define it now, while you both want the best for each other. Define roles and responsibilities with absolute clarity. Who has the final say on hiring, on expenditures over a certain amount, on strategic pivots? Vagueness is a breeding ground for resentment. Include a dispute resolution clause. If you have a major disagreement, what do you do? Do you go to mediation? First, arbitration. Avoid litigation at all costs. It will destroy the business and your soul. Second, independent legal advice. This is critical. You cannot use the same lawyer. Your interests, while aligned now, may diverge. Each of you must have your own counsel review the agreement. Your lawyer's job is to protect you, and only you. It might feel adversarial at the moment, but it's the most pro-relationship step you can take. But then the anger came a pure cold fury. I refused to let him rewrite my history. I decided I would treat this like an investigation. I would become a detective in my own life. I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started piecing the puzzle together. I went back through years of emails. I had archives on an old hard drive. I searched for every mention of partnership agreement shares. It was tedious, heartbreaking work. Reading our old exchanges, the enthusiasm, the camaraderie, all of it now stained. Third, schedule regular partnership health checks. Once a quarter, have a formal meeting outside the office. No agendas about day-to-day operations. The only topic is the partnership itself. Are you happy? Are you feeling heard? Are there any resentments building? This is the time to voice the small irritations before they become irreconcilable differences. My story has an ending. I took my document to my lawyer. He took it to his. It was a short, ugly battle. The paper trail I had kept was overwhelming. The signed amendment was ironclad in the end. He had no choice. The business was mine. The friendship was ash. The final takeaway is this: your dream is precious. It's your baby. You wouldn't leave your child in a car without a seatbelt because you trust your driving. So why would you leave your business unprotected? Build the seatbelt sign. The documents protect your dream by having the courage to protect yourself legally from the very start. The lock won't turn. I just stand here, my key hovering an inch from the keyhole. It's not that it's broken, it's that the mechanism itself has been changed. I can see the fresh scratches around the metal plate. This is new. This was done on purpose. And this letter in my other hand, it feels heavy, like it's made of lead instead of paper. My lawyer's words are still ringing in my ears. He's claiming full ownership. He's locking you out. He says you were just an employee. An employee after 10 years after we built this from a sketch on a napkin into this. I am staring at our logo on the frosted glass. My own reflection is staring back, pale and distorted. How did I get here? How did I end up on the wrong side of this door, holding a letter that says I have no right to walk in? It's a stupid question, really. I know exactly how I got here. I just didn't see it happening until it was too late. The memory hits me like a physical blow. It was only 6 months ago. We'd just landed the Anderson account, the biggest contract in our company's history. We were in the same office. But it was full of people. Noise, the pop of a champagne cork. He clinked his glass against mine. His face was flushed with victory. We did it, he said, his arm around my shoulder. Partners to the end. I believed him. I actually believed him. Now the silence in this hallway is absolute. The celebration feels like a scene from someone else's life. It started small, so small, I dismissed it as stress, as the natural friction of running a growing business. He started to take over the finances. You hate this stuff, he'd say, waving a hand at the spreadsheets. You're the ideas person, let me handle the boring bits. It's what I'm good at. It made sense. It was efficient. I was grateful even with his betrayal. But then the boring bits included the corporate paperwork, the annual filings, the contract renewals with the bank. I've got it, he'd say, already stacking the documents into his briefcase. Don't worry about a thing. And I didn't. I was worried about product development, about client meetings. I trusted him. That was the whole point of the partnership. There was a day I asked about the new business loan we were applying for. I wanted to see the paperwork. He got not angry but dismissive. It's all standard legalese. He said, not looking up from his computer. You just get a headache trying to read it. Have you signed the final page? Don't worry. And I let it go. I remember feeling a little prick of unease. But I buried it. I didn't want to be the difficult one. I didn't want to imply I didn't trust him. That unease started to grow teeth. I was looking for a client file one afternoon, and I noticed a folder on his desk. It was labeled corporate assets. I wouldn't have thought twice about it, except that when I casually mentioned it later, his face went blank for a second. Just a fraction of a second, then he smiled. Oh, that just some old tax documents, boring stuff. But his smile didn't reach his eyes. Then the bank statement came. It was a PDF he'd forwarded to me asking me to check a client payment. My eyes skimmed over the numbers. But something felt off. The account balance was lower than it should have been, much lower. When I asked him about it, he was ready. Oh, that's the old operating account, he said smoothly. We moved most of the capital to a new high-yield account, better interest rates. I meant to tell you, he sent me a new statement 5 minutes later. It looked perfect. I remember staring at the screen, that cold feeling in my stomach. I told myself I was being paranoid. This was my partner. We'd been through everything together. But the pieces were there a strange comment from our longtime office supplier. Yeah. We got the notice about the account change, all sorted. I hadn't heard about any account change. When I asked him, he shrugged. Administrative thing. They were overcharging us. I handled it. He always handled it every time a question popped up. He had an answer, a reasonable, calm, logical answer. And each time I talked myself out of the doubt, I was building the prison around myself one rationalization at a time. The day I got the letter, the day I found the lock changed, was the day I stopped rationalizing. The panic was a live wire in my chest. But underneath the panic, a colder, harder thing was forming: determination. My lawyer Sarah is a sharp woman with no patience for sentiment. She listened to my story, her face grim. It's a classic case. She said he's had years to cover his tracks. He's probably moved assets, created shell companies. The paperwork he's presenting looks legitimate. We need evidence. We need to prove your stake. And we need to prove his intent to defraud you. So began the investigation. It was like digging through concrete with my bare hands. Every lead seemed to hit a wall. The bank accounts he'd mentioned. Closed the vendor contracts, reassigned to a company I'd never heard of. He'd built a maze. And he was always one step ahead, actively working against us. He must have known the second I lawyered up. He sent a cease and desist letter accusing me of harassing him and trying to sabotage the business. The irony was so thick I could taste it. We were racing against a clock. I couldn't even see he was trying to liquidate assets, to dissolve the company and disappear with the remains. Sarah said, if he succeeded, there would be nothing left to fight for. I found a thread from 3 years ago about revising our operating agreement. It was routine. But in one email, our old lawyer David had written, Alex, per our call, the revised docs are attached. They reflect the 50-50 split. We discussed, let me know when you and your partner are ready to sign. Alex had replied to him, copying me, looks great, David. Well, get it signed next week. But we never did. Alex had always found an excuse to postpone it. We're too busy. He'd say the deal with X is more. I started from the beginning. I went back through every email, every old backup drive I had stored in my basement. I was looking for anything, a draft of an agreement, an early business plan, anything that showed my foundational role. Most of it was gone, deleted, but he couldn't erase everything. I remembered our first office, a tiny sublet we shared. The landlord was an old-fashioned guy who insisted on paper records. I drove there on a hunch. He'd retired. But his son was running the place now. He was hesitant, nervous. He said he'd gotten a call from my partner, telling him not to cooperate with me, that I was unstable. I must have looked desperate standing in his doorway. I begged him. I told him. We just needed a copy of the original lease, the one with both our names on it. He finally reluctantly went into the back and dug through a filing cabinet. He came out with a dusty folder. It wasn't the lease, it was better. It was an application for a business license from 9 years ago, and attached to it was a document I had completely forgotten about, a partnership agreement. It was a simple one, just a page long, typed out on an old printer. We'd signed it over a pizza, thinking it was just a formality, until we could afford a real lawyer. It outlined a simple 50-50 split. It was something, it was a thread. But it wasn't enough. Sarah said it was a good start, but he would argue it was superseded by later, more formal documents, the documents he controlled. We needed the key, the one piece of evidence that could unravel his entire story. I spent nights awake, my mind circling. What was the one thing he would have needed me to sign? What was the most crucial document? And then I remembered the Anderson contract, the one that started it all. It was a huge deal. And their legal team was meticulous. They required personal guarantees from both partners. I had definitely signed something for that. I tore through my emails again, searching for anything from Anderson Corp. I found the initial congratulations, the project kickoff schedule. But the signed contracts nowhere to be found. Of course, he would have handled that correspondence. But I had an old backup, a full system backup from my computer, from about 8 months ago, before all of this started. I'd done it before upgrading my machine. It was a long shot. I restored the backup to an old laptop. A painfully slow process. I navigated through the file system, my heart pounding. And there it was, a folder labeled Anderson Final. My hands were shaking as I clicked it open. There were drafts, notes, and then a PDF, the final execution copy. I opened it. I scrolled past the legalese, past the terms and conditions, down to the signature pages. And there they were, both our signatures. His was first, and mine right below it, dated the day after our celebration. It was proof I was a partner, but it wasn't the silver bullet. We already knew I was a partner, we needed more. Important right now, he was keeping everything in a legal gray area on purpose. I almost closed the file, but something made me scroll back up to the top of the document, to the section defining the parties, and I read it, and my breath caught in my throat. The party of the first part wasn't our company name, it was his name followed by the words doing business as our company name, and the party of the second part was me my name, but the wording was strange, it wasn't listing me as a cosigner, it was different. I scrolled down, my eyes racing over the text I had skimmed, before I found the clause 17 assignment of interest. It was dense, full of legal jargon. But the meaning became horrifyingly clear as I read it. It stated that in consideration of the personal guarantee, provided the undersigned partner that was Meherebai assigned transferred, and conveyed all right, title and interest in the company, and its assets to the other signing partner to him for the duration of the contract and any subsequent renewals. The duration of the contract, the Anderson contract, was for 5 years with automatic renewals. In effect, I had signed over my company to him. For a minimum of 5 years, I had signed away my business. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. I remembered that day he put the document in front of me, just the personal guarantee for Anderson. He said standard stuff, sign here. I was in a rush to get to a product demo. I didn't read it, I just signed. This was it, this was the trap. He hadn't just stolen the business later, he got me to give it to him on paper with my own signature. But then I kept reading, my eyes now sharp and focused went to the very end of the clause. There was a subsection, a sunset clause. It stated that upon termination of the Anderson agreement, all assigned rights and interests would revert automatically to the original assigner, to me. The Anderson contract, it had a termination clause, a 60-day notice period. If the contract was terminated, my ownership would revert back to me. I called Sarah, my voice trembling as I explained what I'd found. She was silent for a moment. Email it to me. Now, an hour later, she called back. Her voice was electric. This is it, this is everything. He's been operating on the basis of this assignment. But look at the date of the backup. This is the executed copy. He submitted this to Anderson. He thought he had it all, but he got greedy. What do you mean? David had retired a year ago. I tracked him down. It took some doing. I called him at his home. I explained the situation. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, I am not surprised. He told me that Alex had been difficult, evasive. But then he remembered something crucial. He said, you know, right before I left, we did finally sign something. It was a smaller document, an amendment to the original incorporation papers. Alex brought it by himself. He said you were. The Anderson contract, she said. He terminated it last month. I just got off the phone with their counsel. He tried to move them to a new company. He cut the original entity out. He terminated the agreement, which means according to this very document, he relied on to steal your company. The assignment is null and void. Your ownership reverted back to you 30 days after termination. He locked you out of a company you legally own. He's not a thief, he's a squatter. The confrontation wasn't in a boardroom. It was in his new car, a flashy sports he bought with the company's money. I approached him. As he was getting in, he saw me and smirked, still causing trouble. I told you it's over, you lost. I didn't say anything. I just handed him a single sheet of paper. It was the signature page of the Anderson contract with the relevant clauses highlighted. I watched his face. As he read it, the smirk faded. Then his eyes flicked to the date of the backup, printed at the top of the PDF. It was dated before he terminated the Anderson contract. It was a version he couldn't dispute. He saw the highlighted sunset clause. He saw the termination date. The color drained from his face. He understood the math. He had played his hand too soon in his rush to cut me out completely. He had accidentally given me back the keys. You're finished, I said, my voice quiet but steady. The police will be here soon for the fraud report, and then I'm walking back into my office. He just stared at the paper, his hands shaking. There was no dramatic speech from him, no apology, just the silent total collapse of a house of cards. The betrayal wasn't just in the theft, it was in the meticulous, cold-blooded planning. It was in the way he used my trust as the primary tool for my destruction. I took my key out of my pocket. I didn't need it for the new lock. The building manager had already changed it back. Once he saw the court order, the door opened smoothly. Walking back into the office was quiet. The silence felt different now. It wasn't accusatory. It was mine. The victory feels hollow in a way I didn't expect. I survived, I won. But the cost was the complete annihilation of a truth I had built my life on for a decade. The partnership was always an illusion. He was just waiting for the right moment to make it official. I always loved the idea of the handshake deal. It's everywhere, isn't it, in the movies? The successful entrepreneurs seal their partnership with a firm handshake. And a smile, no lawyers, no fine print, just two people looking each other in the eye and agreeing to build something great together. It feels pure, it feels human. There's a certain romance to it, a belief that a person's word is their bond. That's the culture we've built around entrepreneurship. We celebrate the hustle, the garage startup, the late nights fueled by passion and a shared dream. And in that environment, whipping out a lengthy contract feels cold. It feels like you're introducing doubt into a relationship that's supposed to be built on absolute trust. You worry about being seen as difficult or paranoid. You don't want to be the one who says, wait, let's get this in writing, because that implies you think the other person might betray you and out of town, but had signed it already. I thought it was odd that you wouldn't have come in together, but I notarized his signature and filed it. If you can't trust your partner, why are you going into business with them? So you lean into the psychological comfort of trust. It's easier. It lets you believe in the inherent goodness of people. You tell yourself that your shared vision is the only contract you need. But what you don't see, or maybe you choose to ignore, is the power imbalance that's often baked into these informal agreements. The person who suggests the handshake deal is usually the one who stands to benefit from the lack of clarity. It creates a fog where promises can be reinterpreted, where contributions can be minimized, and where your rightful share can slowly, quietly be eroded. I learned that lesson the hard way. My partner and I started our company in that exact same fog of good intentions. We were a team, we had the same dream, we built everything from the ground up for years. It was us against the world, the business was our baby. And then the ambition started to shift. It wasn't about us anymore, it was about winning. And that's when I saw the betrayal for what it really was, a symptom of a much larger problem. This isn't just a story about one person's dishonesty. It's a case study in how our current culture can twist ambition into something ugly. We live in an age of hustle culture, where success is measured solely by the bottom line. And the path to getting there is often glorified no matter how many corners are cut. The message is everywhere: disrupt, move fast, break things. The ethical considerations are treated as secondary, as obstacles to be overcome. When winning is the only thing that matters, morality becomes negotiable. My partner's actions were a direct result of that mindset. The greed wasn't a sudden impulse. It was a slow creep, normalized by a world that celebrates financial victory above all else. He didn't see himself as stealing from me in his mind. He was just taking what he deserved, what he had earned, by being the more aggressive, more ruthless player. He justified it by rewriting our history, by downplaying my role, by convincing himself that his version of events was the truth. The emotional toll of that is profound. It's not just the financial loss, it's the realization that a shared reality can be so easily dismantled by one person's self-interest. It's the chilling effect it has on your ability to trust anyone else. When societal trust erodes at that individual level, it creates a ripple effect of cynicism and self-protection that hurts everyone. I felt completely powerless. He was charismatic, persuasive. He had started to spin a narrative to our clients, to our few employees, that painted me as the weak link, the less committed partner. It was my word against his. And in the court of public opinion, in the world of Hesed, he was winning, he was confident, I was devastated. He was ready to fight dirty. I was still reeling from the shock of the betrayal. That's when I remembered the document. Years earlier, when we were still in that hopeful handshake deal phase, I had insisted on one thing. I said we needed to formalize our equity split. Just a simple one-page agreement stating our percentages. I remember the slight annoyance on his face, the way he signed it with a flourish, as if he was humoring me. Of course, he said, but we don't really need this, we're partners. I filed it away and forgot about it until that moment. My heart was pounding. What document? David couldn't recall the exact details. His records were in storage, but he gave me the name of the storage facility. I flew back immediately. I didn't confront Alex. I went straight to that facility. It was a cavernous, dusty place full of the ghosts of dead businesses. I found David's unit. It was packed with boxes. I spent hours in that dim light surrounded by the smell of old paper and dust, box after box, file after file. And then I found it, a folder. That piece of paper became the great equalizer. It was the tangible proof that cut through all the emotional manipulation and subjective claims. His words were fluid, changing. To suit his purpose, my signature on that document was fixed. It was objective, it was truth. The law, for all its complexities and frustrations, provided a structure where that truth could be heard. It didn't care about his charisma or his rewritten history. It cared about the fact that he had, with his own hand, agreed that half of the company was mine. The contrast was staggering. On one side, you had his emotional arguments, his claims about what he felt was right, his attempts to gaslight me into believing I had contributed less. On the other side, you had the cold, hard fact of a signature. The legal framework didn't resolve our personal conflict. It didn't heal the betrayal. But it did something more important. It protected me. It stopped the exploitation in its tracks. It sent a clear message that powerful manipulators cannot simply rewrite reality to suit their needs. When a formal system exists to hold them accountable, the law in this case was the shield for the vulnerable. Walking out of that lawyer's office with the ruling in my favor, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt relieved, I felt validated. But mostly, I felt a profound sense of clarity about how we need to rebuild. We can't go back to the naive romanticism of the handshake deal. That era is gone. If it ever really existed, what we need now is a culture of accountable trust. Trust is still vital. You have to trust your partners. But that trust must be coupled with clear accountability. It must be documented. And we need to change the narrative around that documentation. Getting a detailed agreement in writing shouldn't be seen as a sign of distrust. It should be seen as the ultimate sign of respect and professionalism. It's a way of saying, I value you and our partnership so much that I want to ensure it's built on a foundation of clarity. I want to protect us both from any future misunderstandings. It's an act of care. This protects more than just the individuals involved. It protects the integrity of the entire business ecosystem. When we champion transparency and ethical practices, we create an environment where innovation can truly flourish. Because people aren't constantly looking over their shoulders, worried about being cheated, we enable real collaboration based on mutual respect and clearly defined roles. So my call to action to anyone listening who is building something with others is this: be brave enough to have the uncomfortable conversation. Be the one who says, let's write this down. See it not as a barrier to trust, but as its reinforcement. Champion transparency in your own ventures. Make detailed agreements the new norm, because the world doesn't need more cowards who avoid hard truths. It needs builders who are brave enough to face love and business honestly. It needs people who understand that the strongest partnerships are those that are strong enough to be documented. That's how we rebuild a culture where trust is real, because it's backed by accountability. And that's the only foundation sturdy enough to build a future on. Mistake: the foundation of our entire partnership was a lie he was patiently, meticulously building. Labeled with our company name. My hands were shaking. I opened it. There were all the old papers, and then a single sheet stapled to the front. It was a document I had never seen before. It was titled Amendment to Operating Agreement, and it detailed a transfer of ownership, but not the way Alex had claimed. According to this paper, in the event of a fundamental dispute between the partners, the shares would be consolidated, and the language was clear, so clear, it stated that if one partner attempted to seize control or act against the company's interest without the other's written consent, their shares would be automatically signed over to the other partner. It was a poison pill, a clause he had intended to use against me, but he had signed it himself. And based on the notary stamp, he had done so after my mother got sick, just before he locked me out. He had been so arrogant, so sure of his plan, that he hadn't even read the final clause carefully, or maybe he thought it would never apply. He thought I would just roll over and disappear. But in his rush to bury me, he had signed his own fate. He had signed everything over to me. The checkmate had to be perfect. I didn't send a letter. I didn't make a phone call. I waited for the quarterly investor meeting. It was a big one with the board members from the Zenith deal. Alex was there at the head of the table, playing the role of the visionary CEO. I walked in the room, went quiet. You should have seen the look on his face, a mixture of shock, then contempt, then a smug confidence. He thought I was there to bet. He said, "This is a private meeting, you need to leave." I didn't say a word, I just walked to the front of the room and placed a single piece of paper on the table in front of him. I had highlighted the relevant clause and his signature right there at the bottom. For a moment, he just stared at it. Then he started to read. I watched the color drain from his face. He looked from the paper to me, his eyes wide with panic. "This is a forgery," he stammered. "This is nonsense." That's when I spoke. My voice was calm, ice cold. I said, "The original is with my lawyer. And the notary David is prepared to testify the business. Every share, every asset is mine. As of the date you signed this, which, if you look at the stamp, was 2 days before you illegally locked me out, you are trespassing in my boardroom." The denial was fierce, but it was hollow. The other people in the room, the investors, they saw it. They saw the truth in his panic. They saw the defeat as he slumped back into his chair. The facade crumbled completely. The power in the room shifted. It was palpable. I wasn't reclaiming a company. I was reclaiming my own mind, my own story. The truth was no longer his to manipulate. He had to get up and walk out of that room. He left behind his laptop, his files, the keys to his fancy car. All of it was mine. Now his greed, his need to have it all, had been his undoing. He thought he was stealing a business from me. But in the end he handed it to me. He signed it over with his own hand. The irony was so thick you could taste it. The cowardice wasn't mine for trusting him. The cowardice was his for being unable to build something real without needing to destroy his partner. And in that moment, standing in the silence he left behind, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, not just victory, peace. Looking back now, the signs were there, I just didn't want to see them. I'd call them small things. But they weren't small, they were cracks, like the time I wanted to bring in a new junior designer, a kid with a great portfolio. Alex shut it down, said we couldn't afford the overhead. It made sense at the time. But then a week later, he leased a new car, a fancy one for the business, he said, for client meetings. I shrugged it off. That's just Alex being Alex. I thought he's always been the one who likes the nice things. It was never just a business. You have to understand that it was the first thing I ever built with my own 2 hands. It was the idea. I'd sketch on napkins. During my lunch break, the dream. I'd whisper to you late at night. It started in our garage, just a folding table and a laptop, the smell of cardboard boxes and ambition. And we built it together, or at least I thought we were building it together. It was more than income, it was my identity. When people asked, "What do you do?" I didn't just say I ran a marketing firm. I'd light up. I'd tell them about our clients, the campaigns we were proud of, the little team that felt like a family. That business was my life's work. It was the physical proof that I could create something from nothing. It was my name, my signature, my soul poured into every invoice and every client meeting. So when he started to pull away, it felt like a slow-motion collapse. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The financial reports got vaguer. He'd wave away my questions with a tired smile. "You worry too much, just trust me, I've got this." And I did trust him. That was the foundation of everything. We were partners in life. And in this. The day I realized what was happening, it wasn't a loud, dramatic explosion. It was quiet. It was a silence on the other end of the phone. I'd called the bank to clarify a transfer. And the woman on the line was confused. She said the account I was asking about, the main operating account, had been closed. I remember the plastic phone receiver feeling cold against my ear. The hum of the computer fan was the only sound in the room. I felt a coldness spread from my chest out to my fingertips. It was a feeling of personal annihilation, like coming home to find your house gone, just an empty lot. I wasn't just losing a company, I was losing a part of myself, a part of my history, a future I had taken for granted. For days I was just hollow. I walked through the apartment like a ghost. I'd pick up a mug we used for coffee during our early morning strategy sessions, and I'd just stand there holding it, feeling nothing and everything at once. The despair was a physical weight, pressing me down into the couch, making even the thought of getting up to make food seem impossible. He had taken it all, the clients, the reputation, the bank accounts. He left me with the name and a mountain of doubt. He told everyone I had chosen to step back, that the stress was too much for me. He painted me as the weak one, the emotional partner who couldn't handle the pressure. And then one morning I was staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were puffy, my face pale, and I saw it a flicker, just a tiny stubborn spark of anger. Beneath all that grief it was a voice, so quiet I almost missed it, that said, "This is not the end of your story." It wasn't a roar, it was a whisper. But it was enough. I had to make a choice right there, staring at my own defeated face. I could let this pain be the final chapter, or I could acknowledge it, feel it fully, and then decide it wouldn't be. The end I chose the fight, it was the scariest choice I've ever made. The fight back didn't start with lawyers, it started with a phone call. My hands were shaking so badly. I could barely dial my sister's number. I told her everything, the whole ugly, embarrassing truth. And she didn't judge me, she just listened. And then she said, "What do you need?" That was the first step, leaning on the people who loved me, not the business. But me, I reached out to a friend from college, who'd been through a brutal divorce. I found a mentor, an older woman, who'd built her own company in a time when no. Or the financials, he always handled the books, it was his thing. He said he had a head for numbers. I had a head for ideas, for the creative side. It was a perfect division of labor. But sometimes it'd ask a simple question like about the quarterly tax payment. And he'd get this edge to his voice. Just for a second he'd say, "I've got it handled, don't you trust me?" And of course, I did, so it'd back down, it'd feel guilty for even asking. That was the manipulation, he was conditioning me to doubt my own. One took women seriously, they became my foundation. They were the ones who told me I wasn't crazy, that my feelings were valid, that I had a right to what was mine. Then came the education. I knew marketing, I knew branding, I knew nothing about business law. The first time I walked into a lawyer's office, I felt so small. He used words I didn't understand. He talked about fiduciary duties and intellectual property assignments. I nodded like I understood. But I left feeling more lost than ever that night. I decided I wouldn't be a passive participant in this. This was my battle. I went to the library. I checked out books on corporate law. I spent nights reading dry, complicated legal texts. Until my eyes burned, I filled notebooks with questions. I became an expert on my own case. I went back to that lawyer with a list of pointed questions. I saw the surprise on his face. And then a flicker of respect, that shift from being reactive to proactive, from feeling like a victim to being the general of my own army. That was everything. It was an emotional roller coaster. There were days I was so exhausted I'd cry in the car after a meeting. There were moments of pure doubt, where I thought maybe he's right, maybe I should just walk away. This is too hard. But then there would be a small win, finding an old email he'd forgotten to delete, a former client who remembered our original agreement. Those little victories were like cups of water on a long desert march. They kept me going. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. It was rainy and gray. I was in my apartment, going through a box of old files I'd stored in the back of a closet. It was mostly sentimental stuff, really logo designs, thank you notes from our first clients. I was about to close the box, feeling defeated again, when my finger caught on a heavy manila envelope tucked at the very bottom. I didn't remember putting it there. I pulled it out. Inside was a stack of papers, and they're nestled between an old insurance policy and the original business registration. Was a document, the document. It was the amendment to our operating agreement. I remembered it, then we'd signed it years ago, after a big fight about the direction of the company. It was a moment of clarity, a way to protect ourselves from each other. He had wanted to bring in a risky investor. I had refused. We'd reached a stalemate. And in an effort to move forward, we'd drawn this up. It stated clearly in black and white that in the event of an irreconcilable breakdown, the business and all its assets would revert solely to me. He had signed it, I had signed it, we'd had it notarized, and then in the rush of success that followed, we'd both forgotten about it. We'd patched things up, moved on, and buried this piece of paper in a box of memories. Holding that paper, my hands didn't tremble, they were steady. It was the steadiest I'd felt in months. The words on the page were a validation. They were proof that my memory wasn't faulty, that my claims weren't hysterical. He had lied, he had stolen. And I had the truth right here in my hands. It wasn't just a legal document, it was an instrument of justice. A surge of empowerment went through me, so strong, it was almost dizzying. The fear that had been my constant companion for so long just evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, certain calm. The truth was always there, it was just waiting for me to find it. Doubts to feel unreasonable for wanting transparency. The rest, as they say, is history. Presenting that document in mediation was anticlimactic. His lawyer's face fell, he sputtered, he tried to argue. But the paper was undeniable. The fight was over almost as soon as it began. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet, I felt strong. Reclaiming the business was just the beginning. I didn't just get my company back. I got it back with new eyes. I rebuilt it with stronger boundaries, with clearer contracts, with a wisdom that only comes from being broken and putting yourself back together. I am a different person at the helm, now more confident, more savvy. I don't take anything for granted. The ordeal forged a resilience in me I never knew I learned to trust my own instincts above all else. And that's why I share this story. It's not to rehash the pain, it's to tell you that you are stronger than you think you are. That flicker of determination you feel when you're at your lowest, that's your real self, your core strength, waiting for you to listen. Your pain can be a fuel if you let it. And documentation, it's not just bureaucracy. It's a form of self-defense. It's your word made permanent. It's the truth written down, waiting for the right moment to speak. You can survive the betrayal, you can fight back, and you can rise, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. You can rise stronger. The business was our dream. We started it in my garage, just two friends with an idea and a lot of energy. But you can't run a serious operation on a handshake and a shared spreadsheet forever, so we formalized it. We chose an LLC, a limited liability company. It sounded complicated, but it was the simplest structure for us. It meant the business was its own legal entity, separate from us personally. If something went wrong, our homes, our personal savings, they were supposed to be protected. That was the theory anyway. Our operating agreement was the blueprint. It was about 20 pages long, and we paid a lawyer a few $1,000s to draft it. It laid out everything, or so we thought. It stated our 50-50 ownership. It defined our roles. He was the face, the sales guy, the visionary. I was the operator, the one who managed the money, the logistics, the day-to-day grind. My contribution was more than just sweat equity. I had put in 60% of the initial capital, because I had more savings at the time. The agreement had a clause that would adjust for that over time through distributions. His contribution was the original client list, his network, his intellectual property, in the form of the business model. We had a single business bank account. Both of us were signatories, meaning either one of us could sign a check or authorize a transfer. That was the first flaw. The profit sharing was straightforward. After we paid ourselves modest salaries, we'd split the remaining profits quarterly. It felt like a clean, fair system. We valued the company at $1 million on paper after 2 years based on our recurring revenue. It was all there in black and white. But the agreement had a silent weakness, a gap we saw coming. It didn't explicitly outline the process for removing a partner, or what constituted a breach of fiduciary duty in granular detail. It assumed good faith. That was the crack in the foundation. There was a growing unease, a constant low-level hum in the back of my mind. It felt like walking through your own house in the dark, and sensing a piece of furniture is a few inches out of place. You can't prove it, but you just know something is off. I'd catch him on the phone in his office, his voice dropping to a whisper. When I walked by, he'd always have a smooth explanation. A difficult client, a family matter. And I, the loyal fool, accepted everyone. The mechanics of the theft were not dramatic. There was no armed robbery. It was quiet, digital, and bureaucratic. It started with small things. I'd get a notification from our accounting software that my access level had been changed. When I asked him about it, he said it was a glitch, a system update. Then I stopped receiving the automated reports for our main bank account. When I logged in manually, I saw that my status had been changed from administrator to view only. He had called the bank, pretending be me, and using information he gathered from our shared documents, he answered the security questions and had my privileges revoked. The real move was the diversion of payments. We had a major client, about 40% of our monthly revenue. He went to them directly and said that due to internal restructuring, all future invoices should be paid to a new bank account, one that was under his name. Only he created a dummy corporation with a name similar to ours, just one letter off, and funneled the money there. He altered the corporate records, with the state filing an annual report that listed him as the sole managing member. He used his temporary control, his operational knowledge, to systematically lock me out. He didn't steal a product, he stole the bloodstream of the business. The financial impact was immediate and brutal. My salary payments stopped. The account we used to pay vendors was drained. He had effectively frozen me out of every financial asset. He attempted to take control of assets valued at the entire worth of the company, that paper valuation of $1 million. But more than that, he was trying to steal the future, the recurring revenue stream that was worth multiples of that. For me personally, it was a crisis. I had bills to pay. My credit cards were maxed out, covering business expenses. He was no longer paying. The cash flow was completely disrupted. I was staring at financial ruin, and the business we built was being used as the weapon against me. I had to fight back, but I needed proof. That's where the forensic accounting came in. I hired a firm that specialized in this. They were like detectives for numbers. They went through every transaction, every wire transfer, every invoice for the past 3 years. They traced the payment from our big client to the new bank account he had set up. They created a map of the money. And it all led back to him. It was meticulous, painstaking work. But it was all circumstantial. It showed what he did. But I needed silver bullet. And I found it. It was a document I had almost forgotten. About 2 years prior, we were applying for a significant line of credit. The bank required that both partners personally guarantee the loan. He was hesitant. He was buying a house at the time and didn't want the debt on his personal credit report to move forward. We signed an amendment to our operating agreement. In it, he formally acknowledged that my initial capital contribution gave me a controlling interest 51% for the purposes of major financial decisions, specifically including debt obligations. And the most crucial line was this: in the event of an irreconcilable dispute regarding the management of the company, the decision of the majority member, my name, shall be final. The trigger was the Zenith Corporation deal. It was our biggest break, a multi-million-dollar contract that would put us on the map. We worked day and night for months to land it. And when we did, the celebration was incredible. We were on top of the world. That's when my mother got sick. It was sudden. And it was bad. I had to fly cross-country to be with her. I told Alex it'd be gone for a few weeks, maybe a month. I handed him the reins. I said, keep the ship steady. He hugged me. He told me not. I had stored a scanned copy in a separate personal cloud drive. He didn't know about the original, was probably shredded by him, but my digital copy was timestamped and had the lawyer's digital signature on it. We analyzed the document. His signature was there, clear as day. It was witnessed by our lawyer and notarized. The context was undeniable. It was a legitimate amendment executed during a specific business event. It wasn't something I could have forged after the fact. My lawyer explained the legal precedent in contract law. This is called an integrated agreement. The amendment, once signed and delivered, became part of the entire operating agreement. It superseded the earlier 50-50 language for the specific issues it addressed, and by granting me controlling interest in management disputes, it fundamentally undermined his claim to sole authority. His attempt to unilaterally change the corporate records and freeze me out was in fact a management dispute, and according to the document he himself signed, I had the final say. The fact that it was notarized gave it an immense level of credibility. It was our own words, signed under penalty of perjury, coming back to haunt him. Legal outcome was swift. Once we presented this, we didn't even have to go to a full trial. His lawyers saw the document and knew his case was untenable. The judge granted an injunction forcing him to return all diverted funds and reinstate my access immediately. The case didn't just end with me regaining control. Because we could quantify the financial damage, legal fees I incurred, the lost interest on the diverted funds, the business disruption, we were able to sue for financial damages. He was forced to settle, paying a significant sum. On top of returning what he stole, he was also legally removed from the company entirely. The first thing I did was implement new financial controls. No single person has authority over anything major now. The bank account requires dual signatures for any transfer over $1,000. We use a transparent accounting system, where every transaction is logged and visible to a third-party accountant and myself. We have mandatory quarterly audits by an external firm. It's more paperwork, but it's a necessary cost of doing business. It's the immune system for the company. My advice to anyone going into a partnership, no matter how much you trust the person, is to get the documents right. The operating agreement is the most important one. It needs to have a clear buy-sell clause. It needs to define exactly what happens if a partner wants to leave, or if they're forced out. It needs to outline what constitutes a breach of duty, with specific examples like diverting funds or locking out a partner. It must require unanimous consent for major decisions like changing banks, taking on debt, or altering ownership percentages, and every single amendment, no matter how small, must be signed, witnessed, and stored securely by all parties. The bottom line is this: we spend so much time building a business, product, the clients, the brand. We pour our passion into it, but protecting it financially is not a separate task. It is fundamental to building it. The documents are not just paperwork, they are the rulebook. And if you don't write the rules clearly, someone else will rewrite them for you. The financial safeguards you put in place are not a sign of distrust. They are the ultimate sign of respect for the dream you're trying to build, because without that Structure, it's not a business, it's just a hope, and hope is not a balance sheet asset. Worry about a thing, he said the business was in good hands. I believed him. We were never just partners. That's the first thing you have to understand. The business, the company we built from a scribble on a napkin. It came second. First, you were my friend. My best friend, really. We met in college, sharing a laugh over a terrible professor. And that was it. We just got each other. Knew how the other one thought. You were there for my first heartbreak. I was the one you called when your dad got sick. We celebrated promotions, navigated bad apartments, and dreamed about a future that felt limitless. Starting the business together felt like the most natural next step in our story. It was our thing, our shared project, our crazy dream. The lines blurred so easily, so completely. We weren't just working together from 9 to 5. It was our entire lives. Late nights at the office turned into crashing on the couch, in the conference room ordering pizza at 2 a.m., and talking about everything, our ambitions, our fears, what we wanted our lives to mean. We celebrated every small victory like it was a national holiday. The first paying client, leasing our first real office space. We'd go out for a drink, just the two of us, and toast us to our brilliance, our partnership. The business was like our child, something we were both fiercely emotionally invested in. We nurtured it, worried over it, poured every ounce of ourselves into it. And because it was us, because we were brothers in all but blood, we operated on trust. A handshake was better than a contract. Your word was your bond. We laughed at the idea of getting everything in writing. That was for people who didn't trust each other. And we had absolute, unshakable trust. That was our foundation. It was also our greatest vulnerability. But foundations crack under pressure. The stress of the business started to magnify every little difference between us. What I saw as cautious planning, you started to call stagnation. What you championed as aggressive expansion, I began to see as reckless spending. Our arguments, which used to be lively debates, started to have a bitter edge. I remember one evening, we were going over the books, and I suggested we hold off on hiring another person. I was thinking about cash flow stability. You looked at me with this disappointment. You said I was losing my nerve, that I was afraid of success. That stung. It wasn't about business logic anymore, it was a personal attack. Resentment began to build quietly like a slow leak. I felt I was the one always worrying about the details, the payroll, the bills, while you got to be the visionary, the big idea guy. I was staying up late balancing spreadsheets. And I started to feel like my sacrifices, my caution, were going unacknowledged. They were just seen as obstacles. And then there was Sarah. When you started dating her, something shifted. She was ambitious, in a way that felt sharp. She'd make little comments when I was around, a real gadgeter. Wouldn't hesitate like that, or you're carrying this place on your back, you'd just laugh it off. But I saw the seeds being planted. She was poisoning the well. And you were drinking it. We stopped having those late-night talks. We started avoiding the difficult conversations. It was easier to just focus on the work, to paper over the cracks with busyness. We were a partnership in name, only two satellites orbiting the same space. But no longer connecting. It was already too late, and I was too blind to see it. The betrayal didn't feel like a business negotiation. It felt like a divorce. You used everything you knew about me, every vulnerability you'd learned over a decade of friendship, as a weapon. You knew I was risk-averse. So you framed your power grab as a necessary step to save the company from my timid leadership. You knew I valued loyalty above all else. So you questioned mine, publicly suggesting to our key clients that my heart wasn't in it anymore. You didn't just steal the business, you tried to steal my. While I was sitting in a hospital room holding my mother's hand, he was executing his plan. It was so clean, so surgical. One day, I tried to log into the company server to check on some project files. Access denied. I thought it was a glitch. I called Alex. His phone went straight to voicemail. I emailed him, no response. A cold dread started to creep up my spine. Then, I got the formal letter from a law firm. I'd never heard of it. Stated that my services with the company were no longer. Reputation, my character. You told people I was burnt out, that I was considering leaving. You made it seem like you were the one holding everything together, reluctantly stepping up to save our dream from me. The day you formally pushed me out was the worst day of my life, worse than any funeral I'd ever attended, because I was grieving two deaths at once: the death of our company, our shared child that we had raised together, and the death of our friendship. The trust that I thought was the bedrock of my life was just gone, shattered. The isolation was profound. It wasn't just losing a business partner. It was losing my confidant, my history. All those memories, all those shared struggles felt tainted, rewritten. I felt Fool, the silence in my own home was deafening. I couldn't even look at the photos of us from the early days. It was all a lie. For months, I was adrift, angry, heartbroken, filled with a sense of injustice that was eating me alive. My lawyer was pragmatic. She said these things are messy, that partnerships dissolve, that we'd have to untangle the assets. It felt so cold, so clinical for something that was tearing me apart emotionally. We started the process, the legal separation, boxes of documents, financial records, years of our lives, reduced to receipts and invoices. It was torture. Every signature felt like another nail. Coffin of our friendship. And then she found it. My lawyer called me, her voice unusually excited. She said she'd been going through the original incorporation documents, the ones we'd signed in a haze of optimism all those years ago. There was an addendum, a clause we'd both agreed to in the very beginning, a safety net we'd joked about. And then forgot. It was a buy-sell agreement, a simple paragraph that stated clearly and unequivocally that in the event of an irreconcilable split, whichever partner was found to have actively engaged in a campaign to force the other out through defamation or malicious action, would forfeit their entire stake. Their shares would be signed over to the other partner. You had been so confident, so sure of yourself, that you never even had your new lawyer look at the original agreement. You thought you'd rewritten the rules. But this was the one rule we'd set together back when trust was real. And your actions, the emails you'd sent to clients badmouthing me, the paper trail of your character assassination, were a perfect, undeniable match for the clause. The paper, that single piece of paper we'd signed a lifetime ago, became the truth that cut through all the emotional chaos. The final confrontation wasn't in a crowded room. It was in a sterile conference room with our lawyers present. When my lawyer slid a copy of the document across the table, to you, I watched your face. I saw the recognition, then the confusion. And finally, the slow dawning horror. You read the clause, you read the evidence against your own signature. Was there, right next to mine, agreeing to this exact outcome. There was no fight left in you, the arrogance just drained away. You signed over your shares, you signed over the company to me.